Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Subscribing to My Podcast. Because I have a new guest featured every week, it makes it very difficult to maintain consistent viewership. So if there's one thing that you can do to support me or the guest featured on the show, it's by interacting with my channel in every way that you can. You can always decide to unsubscribe later if you decide that you hate me or my show. With that plugging aside, enjoy my discussion with Stewart Holland and Beth Silvers are both hosts of the Pantsuit Politics Podcast that has been featured on the New York Times and a lot of other mainstream news media hosts, and they talk about current events and politics. So I figured I'd reach out to them and see if we can get a grasp on some of the current stuff that's happening today, a little bit about Trump's administration and just their thoughts about what's going on, since there is certainly a lot of stuff going on. So why don't you go ahead and each introduce yourself, and then we can talk a little bit about your show.
I'm Beth Silvers. Sarah and I have been co-hosting Pantsuit Politics for the last 10 years. We both live in Kentucky. I am in the northern part of the state, and my background is I'm a trained lawyer. I practiced for a few years as an HR professional, and then I left to do Pantsuit Politics full time. So love doing the show. I have 2 kids. I'm married, and just trying to figure out my place in the United States every day and how to be a contributing citizen.
My name is Stewart Holland. I'm the other co-host of Pantsuit Politics. My background was in politics primarily. I do have a law degree, but I never practiced law. I only worked in politics for Hillary Clinton's 2007 presidential campaign. It really ages me. And then I worked for the United States Senate before moving home to my hometown of Paducah, Kentucky with my husband, where I did some writing and social media consulting and parenting blogging, which led me into podcasting, which led me to Pantsuit Politics. I have 3 sons, 16, 14, and 11. And I love working with Beth and being in community with all our listeners. We really have an incredible group of people that have, some of which have been with Pantsuit Politics for the entire 10 years.
Yeah, and Sarah, there's something going on with your mic. Maybe, I don't know if you hear that, Beth. Maybe there's like a setting. It just sounds a little crunchy, I think.
And I think you might be coming in through your computer instead of the mic.
All right, I fixed this, and then it decided to.
There we go.
Oh yeah, crispy. Okay, cool. That's great.
I'll let you do that again.
Yeah, go ahead. You can do it again, and then I'll cut that part out.
My name is Stewart Holland. I am the other co-host of Pantsuit Politics. I also have a law degree, but worked primarily in politics for Hillary Clinton's 2007 presidential campaign, which really dates me. And then I worked for the United States Senate before moving back to my hometown of Paducah, Kentucky with my husband in 2009. I worked in social media consulting. I had a parenting blog before starting Pantsuit Politics with Beth. I have 3 boys, 16, 14, and 11. And I love this work. I love talking with Beth, and I love being in community with all our listeners, some of which who have been with us for the entire 10 years.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about your guys' show and what you do. So if you could give me a synopsis about what your show does and what you kind of look for when you're making episodes and where your guys' specializations lie when you're doing the show.
We try to process the news. So we are not journalists. We're not trying to report the news. We don't intend to be anyone's single source of news. We're not breaking news. So we don't feel compelled to chase the news cycle. Sometimes we'll say, we're not ready to talk about this yet. We need to think about it more. We need more information to come in before we can have a good conversation. So come back and we'll talk about this headline story in a minute. When we say we want to process the news, we mean we want to bring our full selves to it. So we're not journalists. We're also not pundits. We're not on any party's payroll. We just want to come together and see what's going on in the world, what we've been able to learn about it through our own research, and how we're feeling about it, what it calls us to do in the world, what connections we see to our parenting, to our civic life. And then I'm sorry, I've got this thing switched. And now I have a tech issue. Hang on.
No problem.
Don't switch. There we go. I'll start that last little bit again. Then we think about what it calls us to. Like, what does this mean for us as parents? What does it mean for our communities? What does it mean in our relationships? And our listeners do that with us, which is the most fun part of what we do.
Yeah, and I think that this is kind of important. I feel like a lot of shows and stuff, and I know you guys just did an episode talking about kind of the honesty of political punditry and doing shows like this, and so I think that it's important to know that you're not getting paid for, these reactions are raw and real, and then you guys kind of have that wherewithal to know, like, look, we're reacting to this, we're not gospel, we're not saying like what exactly is happening, we're mostly just reacting to it. Now obviously you guys are both have a lot of background in politics, so I trust your guys' interpretation of a lot of the things that are happening a bit more than maybe like a layman or something like that. But I do think that your guys' approach is super interesting in that
Well,
regard.
I think it's more than just like financial payment that I'm concerned about. I mean, I think in this industry, the growth motivation, just the survival motivation. I don't want to make it sound like everybody is nefarious, but the reactions that are more incendiary, more conflict driven, those drive views. So if you're in the business of garnering views or downloads or likes or comments, there is just an inherent motivation to be as divisive as possible. I think it is the reason that, despite the fact that there are millions of Americans who are mostly found in the normal middle, they don't, consume a lot of political content. They don't feel like it would be the end of the world if their child married a member of the opposite party. Like they don't see the world through that lens. And they're not engaging with political content. So if you are in this universe, you're like getting a sample of Americans who, as consumers, are highly motivated, or not even highly motivated, but as consumers have a different approach to news and politics than a majority of Americans. So even if you're just like in the comments, you're engaging with people that are pretty unique. And then the creators themselves are motivated to serve that audience, not to speak to or about majority of Americans who don't filter every incoming piece of information through a hyper-partisan lens.
Yeah, and I think this is really interesting about content creation and putting information out there. And I think you guys have actually written about this when you talk about how, like, political polarization and how to talk about things when you disagree with the other person. And I think that this approach is really good, but I think that at the foundation of this is content creators and politicians who their sole purpose is to divide people. And I think that this is a really important caveat that you guys are putting out there when you say, we're making sure that it's not necessarily just getting paid, but it's also about making sure that, we are honest and we know we try not to have these motivations to pursue clicks and just say things that we think are true. And I think this is a really, really interesting dynamic and something that, we can push for too. But I want to talk a little bit about the current administration and your guys' thoughts on the current administration. Now, I know there are a lot of things going on, and that's kind of a broad sentiment. But I guess if I were to ask you guys to poll, what are the most important things happening right now? What are the most divisive things happening right now? What do you guys find yourself talking about the most? What do you think it would be?
Well, I want to add just one more thing quickly because I think it's relevant to the administration. It's not just content creators or politicians. Like, it's the social media platforms and the content creators are responding to an algorithm that makes money off that conflict. You also have media companies, of varying levels of journalistic integrity that also want to feed a divisive narrative, which takes us to an administration that also moves through the lens of that motivation. I mean, he is a reality show president, so he likes conflict among his own administration officials. He likes dramatic moments. The way that this administration has sort of memed this war through their social media channels is abhorrent. This is not a video game. People are dying. The way that they have created content around ICE enforcement and sort of bragging about the cruelty and violence of not only official action towards migrants, asylum seekers, but Americans themselves. This is all a part of the whole, like this administration and the way they perform. I don't know any other word for it. Is a part and parcel of this ecosystem that we all exist within.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important caveat as well, which I didn't think it used to be a problem. I remember seeing that AI video reaction to the No Kings protest where he was flying over and dropping, and I thought that should just be a litmus test for where we are. Like, if you saw the president of the United States posting something like that, that should spark some reaction in you that we are no longer talking about what the president is supposed to be, and it's now become, like you said, a reality TV president. He's become
like many people are not going to see that post. That's the issue, right?
Uh-huh.
That majority, they don't see it. They barely watch the news. They're very low engagement. And so, I think that's, and I don't have a solution for this gap between people who can see how they talk and what they do and follow it closely, because I don't want everybody to be like that, right? I don't think America would be a healthy place if everybody was on X. I don't want that, So but I think that it's like two realities. Like, there's an online reality, there's an in real life reality. And even within both of those spaces, like, how much do you engage with news and politics? How strongly do you feel through that partisan lens? And I think this last election where people just thought he was going to drop inflation, and that's what they voted on. And there was millions and millions of Americans who had absorbed how he behaves. You couldn't have not absorbed how he behaves over the last 10 years, right? But they are willing to sort of look past that if they can get the outcome they want. I do think that spell has broken, for what it's worth. But I do think that was a part of it.
Yeah, I think it was a huge part. A lot of the voting, at least recently, has felt more vibes based. Like, it's just, how do I feel about the character? And so, I feel like when I was listening to people talk about Kamala Harris, and they say that she's the most unlikable president candidate, and then I think about what that means, and it's there must be more than that, right? There must be more than, surely Trump is an unlikable guy, but beyond that, it's there should be policy, there should be things that you are wanting, but so much of it has felt like it's just, this guy's funny and this girl kind of creeps me out a little bit. I just think that there should be more to our political discourse than this, but I guess that it's kind of easier for that kind of sentiment to be pervasive online than it is for you to kind of argue this kind of well, tariffs are going to work in this way because 10 years down the line. I think that requires a lot more argument than maybe just saying, well, this girl kind of creeps me out, so I didn't want to vote for her. And I think that that's a really big problem, and that kind of feeds into that media ecosystem, because the easier thing to say is kind of what's going to get dispersed the most. But beyond that, I guess, what would you guys say? I know the war with Iran is huge right now, and then recently, and it kind of died down, but that's because we've pulled ICE out of Minnesota, but a lot of the immigration conversation was pretty pervasive for a while. But when you guys are covering, what are you focusing on? What do you think is happening right now the most? We can talk about those things, but I wanted to get, what are you guys most passionate about that's happening recently?
And I think that all of this relates that we keep coming back to, what is our North Star? What are we trying to do? What is this administration trying to do through any of these policies? What are the American people looking for? We're talking a lot about data centers and AI, and what's the vision here? What's the promise? What are the guardrails? The same with our foreign policy. It's not just Iran, it's Venezuela, it's Cuba, it's the divorce from NATO that the president seems to be insisting on. It's Ukraine still floating out there. It's China. When you think about the tariffs, you have to marry that policy with other things this administration is doing. I'm in some research right now about the coal plants that the president is insisting stay open. These are plants that were scheduled to be retired this year because they were built in the 60s. They're old. Fixing them is expensive. Coal costs more to burn than natural gas. It costs a heck of a lot more than wind or solar to make energy. And the utilities themselves, along with state regulators, have said this is the most expensive way to do energy for the people that we serve. And so we're going to transition these plants. The administration is coming in like 2 days before the plants are scheduled to be closed and saying, you've got to keep them open. There's a plant in Michigan that it's costing $615,000 a day just to keep it operational to comply with what the Department of Energy has ordered. And the people in the community know it's not making power, and their rates are going to go up because the administration has said you have to do that. So that's one small example, but I think it is a place where we're going to get out of the vibes. Like, that's not about he's funny and she's creepy. That's about, like, in your town, toxic coal ash has been filling up the waterways. Everybody knows it. There was an end in sight. There was a plan being developed over 5-10 years. And because of his vibe, that coal's beautiful and great, we're gonna reverse course on something that the community has been involved in creating. There's a big story out of my town this morning where this woman was offered like $26 million for her farm to build a data center. And she said no. She said, this is a scam. We grow food here and we need food to be grown in this country. And there's no amount of money that is going to be able to deal with the consequences of buying up all this farmland. So I just think, like, what Sarah and I are really trying to do is just get real on everything and see what the on the ground impact is. Like, take us off these meme-based discussions. You want to do Call of Duty from the White House? Great. Tell the families of 7 dead American military members why their loved one died. What was that for? No one can answer that question right now.
Oh, and don't add on to that the $1 billion we're paying to kill wind farms in the middle of an energy crisis. Yeah. I think sometimes just because he doesn't have to worry about money right now because of his own corruption, he thinks the United States doesn't have to worry about money. We're insolvent. We have more debt and more debt service than we have assets. It's just that simple. And there seems to be no concern or awareness coming from this administration or for Congress, for that matter. I don't know where all the Tea Party guys went, but they sure have gotten awful quiet about the United States and its fiscal future.
Yeah, and I think what's weird is that the justification behind these things is kind of this ultra-nationalistic fantasy that we'll be able to survive on our own without the help of any other countries, and then when we can do that, we can kind of just take whatever we want from different places because we no longer need to rely. This is why we're, like, wanting to pull out of NATO. This is why we're kind of just, like, influencing our power over different areas. This is why this was the justification behind the tariff scheme, is that once we stop relying on other countries for our production. And it feels like very strange that I think a lot of people, when you kind of threw that idea out during the election, they were like, yes, I would love that for the United States. But now that the costs for doing that are becoming apparent, like, hey, if we're going to do this, we need to keep these coal plants open because, like, we're running out of money and energy and we need to produce all of this stuff here. And then we're kind of starting to discover, oh, there was a reason why we kind of offshored some of those things, because we don't want a ton of coal plants here because coal plants are super toxic to the area around us. And so I think that there was kind of this fantasy about the United States being this pillar of power that I think people are realizing the costs of. But I guess, what are your guys' reactions to this nationalistic, like, surely there's some attraction to, you know, strengthening our nation, not becoming reliant on other things around us. Obviously, the costs have been too much, but I guess philosophically, how do you guys feel about this concept of unifying the nation in this nationalistic way?
I completely understand wanting to see America as strong, as innovative, as wealthy even, as powerful. I think that, you know, in many ways, the president is a creature of his generations, right? It was hard psychologically on America to just lose in Vietnam. And I think we went through that again in the Biden administration. I think that withdrawal from Afghanistan was really psychologically hard on America. I think people wanted to get out of Afghanistan, but they didn't want to feel like we lost, you know, and they didn't want to feel like we made another bad bet on a foreign war that cost us a lot and we don't have anything to show for it. So I completely get, I mean, Sarah and I love talking about This is our 250th anniversary this year. Like we have a strain of American exceptionalism in us, a lot of patriotism. People ask sometimes, like, are you going to leave the country? Is there anything that would make you move? No, this is my place. These are my people. I love it here. I love what we're trying to do. I think that the thing that is becoming more obvious all the time is that sheen of patriotism and of American strength was a marketing jingle to get the president elected and to be able to take whatever he wanted from this country and from the world. And what we see more and more is that he doesn't care. I mean, so that administration that sold us this sense, we're all going to be richer, your prices are going to come way down, you're going to get something for nothing every day because I'm such a great businessman, right? That same administration that's requiring those coal plants to stay open also approved people's rates going up to pay for it. It is let them eat cake at every turn here. They don't care about the families who have to send people overseas. They don't care about our groceries prices going up because of the tariffs. It was a marketing jingle, and it was really effective, and I totally understand why, and I'm not mad at anybody who was taken in by that. And I want us to get real about what we're doing now and what we're going to do to get out of this mess.
Yeah, and I think that I feel like this kind of mentality is what motivated a lot of the anti-immigration policy that we've been seeing recently, especially with ICE and the kind of idea that we need to get non-Americans out of here. And that mentality, I think, is really supported by this, like, well, they're not part of our nation, so we need to push them out somewhere else. Now, I guess, how do you guys feel about that kind of concept, that implementation as far as deporting people or stopping illegal and maybe even legal immigration to the country?
I want to be clear. I don't think that the anti-immigrant sentiment was motivated just by vibes or marketing or jingles. What Biden did was allow 2 million people in a historic surge across the border that taxed not only the towns at the border, but the cities to which the governors of Texas and Florida shipped those immigrants. So there were real numbers and real consequences, political and otherwise, to the Biden administration coming in and deciding that any immigration enforcement was not their priority. I think it is easy because of the cruel, heinous way the Trump administration has tackled immigration enforcement, particularly through the leadership of Stephen Miller, to forget that there were also actions from previous administrations that got us here. Now, do I think that there are broader global trends? Yes, but some of those are also the consequences of actions in Afghanistan and the Middle East that ended up causing surges of migrant populations from Syria and other places into Europe, into America. Like, this actions have consequences, not just in the short term, but in the long term. And I think that immigration, because our country has continued to neglect comprehensive immigration reform, continues to be one of those areas where you can speak in a way that is emotional and short term and reap political benefits. What I sincerely hope is that one of the consequences of this particular administration's approach to immigration is that we will stop doing that, is that we will stop pretending like this is someone else's problem to solve. We have a broken immigration system, and people like Stephen Miller will continue to exploit it unless we demand of our political representatives that it gets fixed. And they got close until Trump came in and said, no, keep it going because it's such a good political football. So, I mean, that has to happen. That has to happen. Right now, what we've done is punt until now we have ICE as one of the most well-funded paramilitary forces in the world. In the world. It's like China, U.S., and ICE. That's the spending militarily right now. And so, I don't think that's what Americans wanted. I think they wanted orderly borders. But part of that has to come with comprehensive immigration reform, not just border enforcement. And I hope that in 2028, when we're all looking at candidates, that we demand ideas and solutions and real prioritization to that reform.
Yeah, and I think I agree with a lot of that. I do think that when you have this sentiment of the United States being this condensed, like you are either a U.S. citizen or you're not, and this is supposed to exemplify like a status, like you belong to the United States or something like that. And then you have this problem of maybe the Biden administration letting a lot of people immigrate or maybe even illegally immigrate into the country. Now you have the problem of not only is our immigration, the way people get into the country is maybe too loose, but we also have a lot of people in the country that are tarnishing, the American dream or something like that. And I think that you have two solutions. One of them is obviously to fix the way that people are getting across the border, but that doesn't necessarily fix the sentiment that I feel like a lot of Americans had in their heads, that there were people in here who didn't represent the like American dream or something. And this is where I was saying that the nationalistic idea really supports what ICE was doing, and that's how it got a lot of Americans on board with this until I started doing a lot of things that were like, I absolutely do not support this. And so I think that there are like two ways to address the immigration problem or the illegal immigration problem. One of them is probably to get the people who are here out or to convert them into citizenship or something like that, and to stop the people from getting in and something like that. And so I think that a lot of what was used to motivate ICE was this, but I feel like it has slowly morphed into something a lot more racist. It has slowly morphed into something a lot more, I'll just say racist. And I guess, like, do you guys agree with the way that this sentiment has, boiled over and supported ICE? Or do you guys feel like this is not really what started ICE as such a force to be reckoned with? I guess, like, this is where I see the origin of ICE coming from, but I guess I don't origin of ICE in the way that it has been implemented in this administration, not ICE in general.
I think that the president thinks about ICE as the projection of this strength that I do think is part of the marketing veneer. I think that the sentiment, as Sarah was describing, comes from a lot of different places. It is the chaotic border. It is whenever there's a crime story that involves someone who's not here legally. It is a complex system where it's hard for people to understand. There are so many people living here who are not citizens, but are here legally and are here for a purpose. And we want that and we need it in our economy. Depending on what industry you're in, hospitality, agriculture, there are so many spaces, tech, where we really need people who aren't citizens to live here and to work here and to be part of our institutions and our innovation and all the things that make America strong. But our system is so complex that you can't say to someone who's angry about a crime that someone has committed, yeah, but they weren't on an e-visa, and like there are lots of people who are. And the other thing that I think we're struggling with that can manifest in racist language, but that maybe doesn't always come from a racist place, it's just that multiculturalism is hard. And we're doing it at a level that is unusual in the world, in the United States. I interviewed a bunch of teachers about school attendance a few months ago. And listening to them talk about what happens when you have so many different languages being spoken in your school and at home, the difficulty in communicating with families, the different cultural expectations. Like a really simple thing, one teacher told me, we have families here who came from Central America, and we had to teach them that we still have school when it rains. Because where they're from, if it rains, the roads wash out and nobody goes anywhere. And so there are just lots of places where multiculturalism is hard. It's got so many advantages. It's what this country has been built on and where a lot of our success has originated. But we are getting to places where the rubber meets the road. And I think that's why, Sarah was referencing the busing of migrants from Texas into Illinois. I think that's why that was so successful politically. because it demonstrated it's not just that we want to care about people or welcome them or be nice. It's hard to have an influx of a different culture and thousands of people at a time, and to figure out as a community, how do we make this work? I think that a lot of the reason the border issue has been so animating is because the people living at the border were shouldering it disproportionately for the whole country. Trump's answer to that has been simplistic. Get them out, right? And villainize them and make it where the American people are going to celebrate seeing someone dragged out of his home in his underwear. And I think he miscalculated. That's not what people wanted, and that's not what we meant. We haven't figured out how to say what we mean because there are so many complicating factors here, and we need leaders who can do it.
Let me just say, I think Stephen Miller is a racist. I think what ICE is doing is racial profiling. But politics and political persuasion is like improv. You have to say yes and. When you say it's racism, that is a no. That ends it. Because what are people supposed to say to that? I'm not racist, or what? I'm going to fix the minds of Americans who I believe are racist? There's nowhere to go. That's what I learned in 2021 and 2022. That's a conversation ender. And we need conversation in America desperately. And so do I think that there is the presence of racism? Of course. Of course I do. But when we say that's the whole problem, all we do is I think, make fertile ground for people like Stephen Miller. Because people double down, they stop listening, they go into their corners, and we make it acceptable. And I think, again, not to, be beating the same drum, it is not because every American harbors deep racism in their heart that we are in this moment. It is because this particular version of white nationalism flourishes online in spaces that reward shocking takes, fighting, conflict, disagreement, okay? That's all X is built on right now. The algorithm rewards that stuff. And so that's why it flourishes. We don't see in-person meetings. Everybody's not having community gatherings. I mean, I'm sure there are some, but this shit flourishes online for a reason. And I think that it's so easy, again, to let it bleed and to think that it's indicative of some broader coalition in the American public, either online or offline. And I just don't believe that's true. That is not the America I exist in inside my day-to-day life every day in Paducah, Kentucky, which is a red state. That is not what I see. That is not what I hear. That is not what I feel from my fellow citizens, many of whom I disagree vehemently about politics on.
Yeah, and I think what both of you are saying makes a ton of sense. I do worry that sometimes there are two, explanations for the same event that can exist at the same time, and one of which is it could be true that there are events that are happening that are so bad that the hate needs to be stirred. The hate needs to be expressed because the event needs to be hated or something like that. So maybe you could look at events like Alex Preddy, and look at that and be like, okay, we need to be mad about this. This is going to spread because the environment cultivates it and that's how it works. But also, thankfully, we're in an environment that gets this kind of news out. And then you can kind of push this to a lot of other issues. I think that among the left, a big dividing issue is Israel-Palestine, and they kind of use this rhetoric to say that if you are not hateful towards what's going on, you are not being productive enough. And I think that as a normal citizen, it's hard to hear that kind of rhetoric and defense and then choose. It's okay, I don't want to play into this system that pushes hate. I don't want to play into this system, but also people are trying to convince me that this situation is so horrible that I need to hate to be productive. And so I imagine you guys have addressed this in maybe some of your books or some of your podcasts, but how do you cross the line and tiptoe between these two kind of explanations for how bad an event is?
Righteous anger in the face of injustice is a calling. Both Beth and I are women of faith. That matters deeply to me. But hate is not productive. It is toxic. not only to the situation, to the politics, but to yourself. I don't need to hate the people who shot Alex Preddy to be righteously angry in the face of his death. That is not required of me. And I think, again, that's what platforms want. That serves the platform. It does not serve our politics. It does not serve the pursuit of justice. It is performance. It is branding. You're not a good person. You don't care enough unless you perform this hatred for all of us inside Instagram stories or some other platform. And I'm sorry, I don't think that's true. I think it's bullshit. I think it makes some people a lot of money and it tears the rest of us apart. The most successful civil rights movements of the last century were not built on hating your enemy more than the next person. That's not what made them successful. What made them successful was a founding and a grounding in faith and a motivation to achieve pragmatic political successes, often involving a great deal of compromise. People get burned out on this approach to politics and they check out. And the people of Minnesota, the people of Minneapolis who organized in real life were incredibly effective in pushing back against these ICE officers. We had one of our listeners come on and talk to us, and you know what she said? There's no right way to do this. We don't shame people because they're not fighting the ICE officers. If they don't want to follow the ICE officers because they feel unsafe, that's fine. We have other jobs for them. It will take all kinds of approaches. And there are all kinds of ways to be human and to be a human participating in this activist campaign. And it was neighborism. Neighborism isn't built on hate. Like, I reject it. I don't know. I've been doing this for 10 years, man. Like, we've tried it all. We've tried the hate. We've tried the polarization. We've tried the shaming repeatedly. It doesn't work. How do we're going to keep trying the same thing and hope that we once and for all shame and hate MAGA into oblivion? Give me a break, man.
Yeah, I think there was this, there's been this long strain of if you aren't angry, you aren't paying attention. And I would just say, okay, if you're only angry, you're not contributing anything. Because anger doesn't put us in a position to solve problems or to move things forward. It's important. It's fine to feel it. And there are things that you should be angry about, for sure. But then that anger should take you to a place of connecting. And politics is a game of addition. You want more power to do the good that you see needing to be done in the world, you got to bring new people around and telling them that unless they feel exactly as you feel about it, they're stupid. That doesn't win anything. Telling people that they need to be as angry as you are at someone else doesn't bring anybody new in. So, part of what Sarah and I try to do at Pantsuit Politics is say, like, come pay attention to the world with us without feeling constantly angry and depressed and stressed out. Because we're not going to get to a place where we go, well, we did it. We fixed everything. You can turn the news off now, unplug it. We did it. We're all good. Every generation has had its challenges. Every generation has met horrible injustices. There will always be people like Vladimir Putin in the world who look at the world as his for the taking. So you got to build some muscles beyond that instant outrage if you want to really make a difference. And that's what we hope people listen to us to do, to really want to make a difference in the long term without feeling like they're in control of everything, because we aren't. We had a long conversation this morning about what's going on in Iran with someone who has diplomatic experience. And someone put in the chat, like, and the strategy for this is out of my hands. Like, what can I do? And that's a great question. Like, that's the kind of person that we want listening to our show.
Yeah, and I think both of this stuff is really good. I found when I'm making a defense like this, in the defense that you guys have kind of just described, sometimes I get an accusation that it is a privilege to have that kind of defense. Now, this is mostly used when the effects are something that is like culturally related or something that doesn't involve the United States. This is definitely involved with foreign affairs or immigration, and I guess and this is also an accusation of being naive or something like that, and thinking that, like, you know, the world is just gonna hold hands, and that, like, yes, things were bad, but things are particularly bad now, and if you aren't engaged, you're not going to be effective. How do you guys combat this kind of argument?
We've certainly heard a lot of that in our day. You know, and whatever the issue is, right? Well, if you weren't white, you would feel differently. If you were poor, you would feel differently. If you were born somewhere else, you would feel differently. And here's the answer. Like, yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. You know, we can all only be who we are. But I also think that the people who have, as Sarah said, led movements on behalf of groups that we're not part of, have come from the same position. Take it one day at a time. Have a North Star. Adhere to principles that don't make you dehumanize your opponent, even if they are dehumanizing you. Play a long game. Add people to your cause. You know, we're not saying anything that hasn't been at the core of everything that's actually accomplished things in the world. And so, I can't control how people filter me and how they discount me based on whatever characteristics I have. I can just keep saying what I know to be true, and what allows me to continue to pay attention. I've been part of a lot of movements. You can certainly find it in the religious world. You can find it in the yoga world, which is something I've been part of too, where the answer is tune out. This is too stressful. It's too much. And that does feel privileged to me in a way that I don't want to take that on myself. I just want to build the muscles that I need to stay in it, and know that no matter what I say or do, someone is going to have a critique of it. And that's all right. That's being a person who's in community too.
I think it's bullshit, and I can't roll my eyes hard enough at, I don't want to hear that word ever again. So who would have the right to an opinion in Iran? I mean, not a male Iranian, because he would have male privilege. And maybe just like a child. We only get to hear takes from like the children of war zones currently. What is the logic here? It is so, if you are typing a comment on a social media platform, then you have some sort of privilege. Does that make you disqualified when you're accusing someone else of having too much privilege for a take? It's bullshit. It is a way to silence people. It is a cheap, easy, illogical, like, performance of an argument, because it's not an argument. It's pot kettle. You don't count because of who you are. You don't get to make this argument because of who you are. No, I'm not doing that anymore. Again, I lived through 2021. I don't want to do it again. I don't think it worked. I think it's a huge reason why we're here where we are today. And so I don't want to hear it. I'm sorry. I think that is so stupid. And as you can probably tell, Beth is nicer than me. So she has a lot more nice ways to say, like, that's not it, man. That's not it.
It's not just about being nice. It is also that, like, I don't want to do it anymore, but people are doing it. And so I'm not going to fight with reality. Like, I talk about politics on the internet. Like, somebody is going to have every single reaction you can possibly have about what I say. That's all right. It's part of it. I think that, again, part of doing something that lets you be involved in politics sustainably is to find your people and know whose criticism matters to you. Know who you will listen to tell you that you got it wrong for whatever reason, because you got a relationship of trust with them. It makes sense. I just retweeted, or whatever you say, reposted somebody on Substack who was saying, like, a real flex is knowing whose feedback matters to you. And I think that that's the only way to get through life in general. So the privileged feedback just can't matter to me anymore, because I do think it has been used as a weapon in so many places. And at the same time, of course, I want to be aware of my blind spots. Of course, I want to look around and say, who's not at this table who could contribute something that we're not seeing? All that work done in 2020, 2021 that made a lot of this so toxic was good work. It just got interneted, into something that isn't very helpful. So I want to hold on to what was valuable and what is valuable, and let the rest go.
Yeah. No, and I think this is good too. And I think that an interesting part about this kind of approach is that it also doesn't posit any solutions or any opinions either. It just says, like, you can't have an opinion, but we're no step closer to having the right one. We're no step closer to making a change. And so this is kind of like what Sarah was saying earlier about this is kind of a conversation stopper. Like, this just, like, is the no. You know, this is the same thing. It's just ineffective. It's like, it can be true, but it's like, too bad. Like, there's nothing else I could do about it, you know? And so I think that it's kind of a useless way of approaching things. Although I do think that while dangerous and chaotic, I think, and probably immoral to some extent, producing anger has been kind of effective for getting good things done. It's kind of like a bad means to a good end or something like that. And I do think that it would make me. Do you guys think that there are maybe situations within the last 5 years that you would be less hesitant to use this kind of language? Like, have you ever been urged to produce anger, whether it be righteous or something like that, towards a specific person or situation? Like, I'm trying to imagine, like, if during something as, like, atrocious as the Holocaust, if there were people that were saying the sentiments that you guys were saying, it would make me pretty uncomfortable because that situation is so obviously horrible, and like anybody who's diminishing the power of what we could do to prevent that would seem kind of like an enemy to me, even though what they're saying is probably true. So I guess if you can parse the long-winded way that I've described this question, do you think that there are situations now that are serious enough that we probably should be producing anger, we should be producing these things, or do you think that we can kind of tackle these problems without it?
I think there's a huge difference between trying to elicit an emotional response and elicit hatred towards another person. If you listen to our show, we're pissed off about things all the time, like constantly. And there are some things that I do think people aren't mad enough about, and I'd like them to get madder about, like the corruption in this administration is one of them. And so it's not to me that, like, you don't want people to feel about politics. It's that you want to check your reason that you want people to feel. And you want them to feel not for the sake of feeling, but for the sake of doing. I want people to know about the corruption in this administration, not because I want them to hate Donald Trump. I'd love for us to never have to feel anything about Donald Trump ever again. You know, that is a person-oriented posture that goes back to, I think, where Sarah started. There are incentives to build content where, you know, people like feeling mad at Donald Trump. Let me just pump out content that makes them mad at Donald Trump. That's not what I want. I want people to be mad about corruption so that they call their senators and their members of Congress and say, what if you pass some laws that say that none of you all can go on Polymarket and make money off of a missile strike? You know, I want to build something with people. And yes, talking to them about things that make them angry, that make them sad, that make them shocked, that make them disgusted is part of that. But I'm doing it not to elicit the emotion so that I hook them in and they spend more time with me. Because, you know, that's what social media is, right? Just stay with me. Stay with me, the platform. Stay with me, the creator. Me. I want to tell the truth about the world as I see it, so that then people say to themselves, what can I do now? What meaning of this do I make, and what action do I feel called to take from it?
And look, I totally agree. I do not think, first of all, I don't want to ever produce anger. I kind of I bristle at those words together. Either you're angry or you're not. Either I'm angry or I'm not. I don't fake anything on our show. And that's pissed people off. I was not angry enough last year. People were mad at me. Sorry. This is not a performance. This is how I feel in the moment about this news story. To the Holocaust example, I think this has become so convoluted and tainted and sort of like a rhetorical crutch that we all use. If you are a student of World War II, then you know that the people who put their lives on the line to save members of the Jewish community or others who were at risk under the Nazi regime did so for incredibly complicated reasons. Their whole entire lives took them to that moment. Think about what it takes for someone to risk their life for a stranger, a friend, or community member. That is not something that is going to be shifted based on the performance, posture, position of a political influencer. Like, if Instagram had it existed, or TikTok or whatever, I think the people who put their lives on the line to save people would have been the same people. Like, that's not something you convince somebody to do in an afternoon. It's who they are, or it's who they're not. It's they're willing to risk or they're not. Everyone's risk analysis and calculus about who they are in a moment like that is their entire lives coming to bear. It's not about whether or not we shame them into doing it strongly enough. Like, I just don't buy that. I think that history and human beings are way more complex than that. And I mean, it can be easy to sort of fall into a sort of not nihilistic, but kind of like, well, then we are who we are and we show up in those moments. And I don't mean that either. I just think we fall on that example too easily. I think that perhaps, there could have been political members or media figures in those moments who could have exerted courage and could have, including in America, when we were turning away entire ships full of Jews that were seeking solace on our shores, many of which ended up in concentration camps. Like, I understand that there were moments where people could have exercised, people with leadership, people with power could have exercised more moral courage. But as far as like all of us as everyday citizens, I think that we could just, I don't know, kind of give ourselves a break and stop putting through everything through the test of like, well, what if this was the Holocaust? I mean, there are moments right now where thousands and thousands of people are losing their lives, including in the Sudan, that we barely pay any attention to. And so, I mean, I don't think that is like sort of a useful or productive framework through which to push everything, because I think every situation is so complex and everyone's individual moral calculus is even more complex. I think what we can do is always demand moral leadership from people in power. And we don't have a lot of that right now. We have a president who celebrates the death of other people. We have a president who pretty openly touts the way that him and his family members make money off the rest of us, who doesn't show any concern except for the political consequences of the suffering of billions of Americans in the face of, high costs, all this chaos. Like, he is unempathetic and completely checked out. And so, demanding moral leadership of those around him is something that we can do. Electing people who exhibit that moral leadership is absolutely something we can do. But I think as far as like are all of us as everyday citizens doing enough, which issue, which person, who are you talking about? Like, it's just exquisitely individualistic as far as that calculus goes.
Yeah, and I think that's about right too. I dislike it when anybody tries to weaponize that kind of event, because there's a lot of preconceptions that we need to understand. One, is the information solid enough for us to believe that it's the same? Is that enough to warrant us to have action, to do action? There's a lot of things that need to happen, but I do think
Are we getting the same information? Often the answer is no.
Yeah, exactly. Like in Germany, I imagine that the soldiers that were committing these actions were getting a pretty good sell as to why they should do these things, but obviously their information was immoral or incorrect, right? And so as a perceiver, it puts a lot of onus on us to be able to interpret, like, what is the real motivation behind why I'm getting told these things. But I do think that the morality is important, but I think that what you guys are saying is it should be, you should kind of does this sound about right? That you should be putting the information out and then allowing the people to have the moral convictions, and then as an internal person pushing information out, you should have your own moral conditions, but you shouldn't be lying about this. You should just be honest about how you morally feel about it, and then push it out honestly and allow people to engage with it in the way that they feel? Or I guess, what is the messaging strategy for you guys?
It depends. I think it depends on what we're talking about. I think that's an enormously interesting and complex question. If we're talking about what we do on Pantsuit Politics,
or yeah, if you wanted to make a prescription about other people,
I wanted to make a prescription for other people. Look, I think that everyone who touches news and politics, if I have one should for them, it is to I think everyone should recognize how serious that responsibility is in a moment like this, when we don't even know if a video that we're seeing is real. And so to me, the guiding light is always tell the truth. And tell the truth in terms of how you're feeling about it. Tell the truth in terms of what you understand the facts to be and how you got there. Tell the truth in terms of what you don't know. Do your best to recognize how big the universe of what you don't know is. From there, different prescriptions for different people. You may say, well, the moral imperative of Democrats right now is to win the midterm elections. And I can make that argument. I can make the argument that the most important thing a Democratic politician should do right now is whatever it takes to win the next election. I can also make an argument that that's a road to selling your soul and to losing your way. And so I think there are a lot of individual decisions that people have to make that no one else can make for them. But I think if you speak from a place of influence right now, whether that is to 10 people who listen to everything that you make and really care about it, or to millions of people, the gravity of the job right now should be on everyone's minds, because we can come back from just about anything if we stop believing in anything. If we just go to that nihilistic place that Sarah was talking about, where just anything goes, probably nothing's real, except money, maybe. I don't know how we come back from that. So the should, to me right now, the imperative to me is truthfulness, whatever truthfulness costs you.
I mean, you probably saw my brow furrow. I don't really think about what I do as information pushing. There's not a deficit of information. That's not the problem. There's plenty of information. There's plenty of media sources. I shouldn't be your source for news. I'm not a journalist. You should get your news from places that pay journalists to go out into the world and not just exist on X, right? Talk to real people. I think about what I do as engaging. And that doesn't just mean engagement with our online community. We have in-person events. I try to be a person who exists in my own community, that shows up for board meetings and charity events and goes to church and knows the people on my street. I think the imperative is to be engaged in online communities, engaged in in-person communities. There's a Substacker I follow who asks a really simple question. What are you doing alone that you could do with other people? Working out, reading a book, eating? We need connection. We need engagement. We don't need more information. That's not what human race and humanity in America is hungry for right now. If we were hungry for more information, we'd all be bringing our shovels to build the next data center. But that's not what we're doing. So I just think, be a person in the world. What is people around you? I am constantly inspired by the people of Minneapolis. Those were not, there was absolutely information sharing. This was not an online exercise. This was a in real life organizational effort that took enormous human capacity. That's what we need.
Yeah, and I think that this is a good note to end on. We've been going for about an hour, but I want to give you guys the opportunity to kind of send us out. So please do any advertising. I believe you guys have an in-person event coming up. So please do any advertising or plugging for any of your channels, things that are happening. And then if you have one take-home message or a theme that you would like to give to people who have made it this far into the episode, please feel free to share that as well. But it's kind of your opportunity to round us out.
Well, yes, we're having a live event in Minneapolis on August 29th. So if you're in the area, you can come see our live show. All the information about that is on pantsuitpoliticsshow.com. We have an incredible community of listeners who come together and in person at our events and in the comments every day at pantsuitpoliticsshow.com. It's an honor to lead that community. And so if you're looking for a place to engage and not just be angry, although we are angry, make no mistake, I invite you to come check us out.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. I think if I had one takeaway for people who were involved in this conversation, it would be to listen to how you ask your questions. I really enjoyed how straightforward your questions were and how much you just said plainly what you see in the world. I think sometimes in the news and politics space, there is a temptation to adopt the language of cable news panels or of X or of politicians. And I think that people who are breaking through and who have the most influence are people who can just have a normal conversation and who don't try to mirror everything that they're hearing in the world. So more person to person, where we're not trying to show off, but we're just trying to say, like, here's what I see. I think that's what will facilitate real political change. I appreciate the opportunity to do it with you today.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming on. I thought this was a blast. Thank you.